All right. So this leads us to a very, very stark disparity, right? So let's look at this, guys. You have East Asian men, and here's how they play the game of immigration. They do well in school, okay? They have good jobs, employment, yes. They have, they're not on welfare, okay? They don't go to jail, okay? And then you look at other minorities, okay? Specifically Hispanic, Black, and Muslim, okay? Well, they don't do as well in school, okay? They don't make as much as East Asian men. They're more likely to be on welfare, and they're more likely to go in jail, okay? All right? So you would think that East Asian men will ultimately triumph in the end. But what is really disconcerting is that, according to game theory, East Asian men are playing the game wrong. Whereas these other groups, these Hispanics, these Blacks, these Muslim groups, they are much more likely to win the game. Okay? So how can we explain this? And the explanation is actually pretty straightforward, but it's actually very disconcerting or very disturbing. The answer is, if someone invites you to play his game, don't agree to play by the rules, because the game is set up so that you will lose. Otherwise, why would he invite you? Think of a casino, right? A casino is like, please come in and play our game. Do you think a casino is fair? If the casino were fair, the casino would go bankrupt, right? The casino is set up so that you have to lose. Otherwise, they go out of business. The same thing with immigration. If a nation like the United States is inviting you into their nation and you play by their rules, you will always lose. Okay? And this is what's happening to East Asian men, where they go to the United States, they play by the rules, and they'll never climb into status positions, and their woman will be married off to white men. The most attractive of all Asian women will be married off to white guys. Whereas East Asian guys will make their money and then stay at home and play video games all the time. Okay? The game is rigged. So the only logical strategy, according to game theory, to this situation is to break the game, cheat, okay? And that's what the other minorities are doing. And how do you do that? Well, you don't play the game. You don't go to school and obey the teacher. Okay? How to win is by sticking together and having lots of babies. And over time, that will enable you to win the game because of demographics. Okay, does that make sense? You're much better off not going to school, being poor, but staying together, being cohesive, and having lots of babies, rather than going to school, getting a good job, doing everything you've been told to do, because ultimately, your energy will be stolen from you because of the rules of the game. Okay? Does that make sense, guys? All right? All right. So, okay. So again, immigration is very important because all in the world, poor people are going to rich countries to seek better opportunities, right? So it's really North America, primarily the United States, Canada, the United States. Then you have Australia, New Zealand, and Europe, okay? And countries that are going to these places are China, East Asia, basically. And you have the Latinos, the Africans, Middle East, okay? All right? And again, you have a situation where East Asians are much more likely to go and conform, but then you have other groups that go and refuse to conform. And as I mentioned, from a game theory perspective, it is better in the long term for you as a person not to conform, not to play the rules of the game, than to actually play by the rules of the game. I know it sounds weird, okay? But according to game theory, that's the best outcome for you, all right? So, an example is in Europe, okay? In Europe, they have a huge Muslim problem. These Muslims are less likely to integrate. They don't do very well in school, but they will claim welfare. They will have lots and lots of babies, which is a drain on the economy of these nations. And what this means is that in the year 2050, okay, in the year 2050, this is what's going to happen. In Sweden, 1/5 of the population will be Muslim. In the UK, 17%. In France, 17%. In Germany, 11%. In Italy, it'll be 12%, okay? So it seems as though there's a population replacement going on. But not only that, but because Muslims are much more likely to have more children than Europeans, the populations that are Muslim will be younger, more energetic. Whereas the Europeans will be much more old, they'll likely be retired. So if this trend continues, then Europe will eventually be taken over by the Muslim minority. Okay? And so the Muslims, they don't do well in school, and they don't make that much money, but look at their advantages, okay? First of all, they are cohesive, okay? Because of their religion, okay? They are energetic because you're young, okay? And they're united because, quite honestly, the Europeans don't really like them. They are an outcast. They're considered an enemy by the Europeans. So if trends continue, then it is most likely that Muslims will control Europe in 25 years' time, okay? Does it make sense? But not only that, but you look at America, okay? Let's look at America. You have a similar situation going on. Sorry. Okay, look at 2050, what's happening, okay? All right, so the white population is declining, okay? Right now it's a majority, but by 2050, it will no longer be the majority. Asians are increasing by a bit, but not that much, okay? But the real growth is in Hispanics, Okay, and not only are they growing in absolute numbers, but again, they are much more young, much more energetic group who are more likely to have children, okay? And they are united because they are Catholics. So they have a common religion, they have a common language, and they have very similar common cultural traits. So that's it. According to game theory, if you're an immigrant, your best strategy is not to do well in school, make a lot of money. That will get you nowhere. You're just playing by the rules of the game. Your best strategy is to stick together with your ethnic group, have lots of babies, maintain your religion, and over time, your children, your grandchildren will come to dominate the nation. Okay? Does that make sense, guys? Any questions before I move on? Okay. The problem with this is that there is no way that the majority, the white people, will just sit back and let this happen, okay? You're gonna have a lot of violence, a lot of conflict. Because from the white perspective, this is population replacement. Okay? If we just let demographic trends continue, if these outsiders just have a lot of kids and we don't have the kids, then eventually our culture will be destroyed. And they're right. Okay? Historically, they're right. And how do we know? Because let's talk about some history. All right? So last semester, we talked about the Proto-Indo-Europeans. Right? Okay, so this is Europe. This is Asia, Anatolia. Okay, so remember that after the Ice Age, hunter-gatherers spread around, okay? Okay, so you have hunter-gatherers around. But then because as the Earth was warming, this allowed for agriculture. And so a new group came into being that focused on agriculture, okay? These are the farmers. These are the farmers. And they arise primarily in Anatolia and the Levant and Mesopotamia because that was the warmest part of the globe that was most amenable to agriculture. But then, if you remember, there's always climate change. And because of climate change, they're now forced to migrate, okay? And a lot migrated to Europe. And when they went to Europe, they forced out the hunter-gatherer, okay? It was not violent because hunter-gatherers have very few people and they're allowed and they can move about, okay? But eventually what happened is that the farmers were able to displace the hunter-gatherers. Okay, now they're established in Europe. You also had farmers who went into the steppes. But remember from last semester, we discussed the steppes and how, because it's grassland, you can't actually farm there, or it's very hard to farm there. So they developed a new economy called nomadic pastoralism. Which is to say that they raised sheep, goat, and cows, and they migrated from one area of the grassland to the next, okay? And as a result, they became very strong, very aggressive people. And again, because of overpopulation, because of climate change, these people are now forced to migrate to Europe, okay? They migrated to Europe, and what happened now? Well, now there's a war that lasts 100 years, 20 years, in which the nomadic pastoralists, the Yanaya or the Proto-Indo-Europeans, they displaced or they eliminated the farmers, okay? And so what happened, we know this from genetic studies, is that the men, the European farmers, were killed, and the women were taken as basically brides, okay? Slaves, basically. Okay, so this is a population replacement. And this, historically, is what happens, okay? One group comes in and replaces the other. And throughout most of human history, this is a constant cycle because the steppes were extremely violent and chaotic. And this forces groups to constantly migrate to other places in search of safety. And in each time, there is population replacement, okay? Primarily in the elite. Okay? So there are very few instances of where groups come together and they are peaceful. No, because you only have one elite, and one elite must replace the other elite. Okay, does that make sense, guys? All right, so if this is historically the situation, how did we get into a situation where immigration has become the norm in today's world? Okay? Before, historically, we believed that you have to stay together as part of your group, otherwise you'll be eliminated. And now we believe that, hey, if you don't like where you are, it's okay, just get up and move somewhere else, and maybe there'll be better economic opportunities for you. This is a shift in mentality, a shift in mindset. Okay, this came about because of the British Empire. All right. Okay, so this is Europe. This is South America, USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Okay, all right. So you have Spain. And Spain, because of the Ottoman Empire, Spain could not access the East Indies trade, okay? So it had to figure out new ways to access East Asia, China, India, because that was where a lot of spices were, okay? And there's a huge demand for spices. So they started to chart new areas, okay? Spain and Portugal primarily. And what they discovered was there's all this new territory in South America. Now, South America is interesting because in South America, you had a huge population and there was a lot of mineral wealth, silver and gold. And so what they could do was they could go over there and enslave the population, okay? So slavery. And then you convert them to Catholic religion. All right? So basically, the easiest areas to colonize, Spain and Portugal took right away. But then afterwards, Britain, England started to play this game as well, okay? And they also sent colonists. But the problem was that there was no large population to enslave. Also, there were a lot, especially in the United States, there were a lot of aggressive Indians, okay, natives. And so the solution was the United States, after it won independence from Britain, it welcomed immigrants from Europe, specifically Ireland, Germany, Poland, these places. The reason why is they needed to displace the natives, okay? And then immigrants were then encouraged to go to Canada and Australia to build their economies as well. So in other words, immigration today, it is a historical accident. The Americans were responding to the specific needs of that time, okay? They were a small population against a hostile people, the natives, in a very large area. And so they needed people to come and farm and industrialize the area. And that's why America welcomed immigrants. And this is new in human history, where you could go to a new place and become a citizen, okay? Usually, if you went to a new place, you went because you were a slave. You were conquered in war, and you went as cheap labor, okay? So in America, they welcome you as citizens if you're willing to contribute, and they allow you to get rich if you worked hard. Okay, now fast forward, and America becomes an empire because it's allowing all this energy to concentrate in America. You have World War II, okay, you have World War II, and America triumphs in World War II. And now America can set the entire rules of the game for most of the world, for Western Europe. And at this time, America said to Europe, you guys fought wars, you guys had fascism because you are a closed society, okay? Closed society means you don't want immigrants, you're all very nationalistic, and therefore you are violent. America won the war because America is an open society which welcomes immigrants, which is a multicultural society that encourages people to get rich and be happy. And so Europe, if you want to be like us, if we want to prevent World War III, then you have to become an open society as well and welcome immigrants just like we do. Okay? And that's why we have the situation where now Muslims are going to Europe and others are going to America. Okay? And what we need to recognize is that immigration, it's a new game developed because of certain historical circumstances, but it's not sustainable in the long term. And so the idea that you can just work hard in school, then go to America and become wealthy, that can't be true anymore. In the future, according to game theory, what's going to happen are these violent conflicts between different demographic groups because each group is trying to set the rules of the game. Because whoever sets the rules of the game will always win the game, meaning they have access to the best jobs, they have the high status, and they have access to the best looking woman, which is ultimately what every man is looking for, okay? Status, attractive woman, power, money.